WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.
Hello and welcome. You're watching WION World is One. I'm Perry Singh. Let's get started with the headlines we're tracking at this hour. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says the Wagner Group will continue to function like usual in Mali after the recent abortive mutiny raised questions about its operations overseas. The Russian President Vladimir Putin appears in a video address, his first after the aborted Wagner mutiny. He is seen in a criminal video addressing a youth forum on Russian industry, but no mention of the mutiny. The Pakistan Army orders a major crackdown in its own ranks over the role in the May 9th riots that broke out after Imran Khan's arrest. 3 officers, including a Lieutenant General, court-martialed. Lebanon's Hezbollah group says it has shot down an Israeli drone in southern Lebanon near the border. It's the latest in the long-standing tensions between the two sides. The 2018 FIFA World Player of the Year, Luka Modric, snubs a big money offer from Saudi Arabian side Al Hilal to sign a 1-year extension at Real Madrid. Well, first up, our top story. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was pushed into crisis mode after the leader of the mercenary fighter group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, declared war on Russia's military leadership. In a critical video posted on social media, Prigozhin criticized the country's leadership for starting the war. He further stated the Ukrainian forces were successfully pushing back the Russian army, but the conflict blew up later as Prigozhin claimed that the Russian military leaders had ordered strikes on his men, killing thousands of them. Now, in a shock twist, the rebel mercenaries advancing towards Moscow were turned around by the Prigozhin leader. After a day of escalating military tensions, the head of the Wagner Group said he had called off the advance of troops to the Russian capital to avoid bloodshed. The short-lived military coup marks the most serious challenge to Vladimir Putin's rule since he came to power in late 1999. The US and its allies are now taking on Putin's authority in the aftermath of this mutiny. And the US Secretary of State said Wagner's short-lived uprising marked a direct challenge to Putin's authority. Antony Blinken flagged real cracks in the Russian state authority. The French President Macron said the march on Moscow shows divisions within the Russian camp and the fragility of both its military and its auxiliary forces. Meanwhile, Britain said it was prepared for a range of scenarios in Russia, noting the potentially destabilizing impact of the tensions between the Wagner Group and President Vladimir Putin.
Yes, I've spoken to the leader of the United States, but also France and Germany over the weekend. We're completely coordinated on our response to this. It's a situation that we've been monitoring for some time, the instability that would be caused by Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. And what we saw over this weekend is an example of that coming to the fore. It's obviously too early to predict with certainty what might happen as a result of this, but I'm in close touch with our allies and we're monitoring the situation closely.
And while quoting UK security forces, the British media reported Russian intelligence services threatened to harm families of the Wagner leaders. The Ukrainian leader, Volodymyr Zelensky, and the US President Joe Biden discussed the revolt ahead of the NATO summit next month. Zelensky said, and I quote here, the world must put pressure on Russia until international order is restored. Kyiv, however, said the unrest offered a window of opportunity for its counter-offensive. On the other hand, the Chinese Foreign Ministry called the mercenary revolt Russia's internal affair and expressed support for Putin's government. The Wagner had only 8,000 fighters rather than 25,000 fighters it claimed, and faced likely defeat in any attempt to take the Russian capital. And for more on this, we are now being joined by retired Colonel Rich Outzen from Washington, D.C. Outzen is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council and the Jamestown Foundation. Colonel Outzen, thank you very much for talking to us this evening. This is by far the greatest challenge to Vladimir Putin since he came to power. Has he been significantly weakened or not?
Time will tell how significantly, but certainly any time the leader of a large and powerful nation with a large and powerful military is shown not to have what we call unity of command, not to have full control and monopoly over the use of force, it is a weakening of their position. So obviously Prigozhin and his 8,000 troops is not big enough to threaten actual control of the state. There were people predicting this could morph into a full civil war. There's a lot of talk about what Prigozhin's motives were. But once the families of the Wagner leadership were threatened and a few other skirmishes were conducted, Prigozhin backed down. But still, something like this is actually an armed insurrection, not a politically metaphoric insurrection. And a challenge to a leader like Putin, who relies on authoritarianism and control of the military and force, is a significant blow.
So certainly suggest a serious blow to his image. And the West will be watching this closely as well for its larger implications on the outcomes of the war in Ukraine, if any, actually.
Absolutely. So this may not determine the fate of Putin or the fate of Russia, but it certainly damages Wagner as a fighting force. Wagner has been a force that Putin has relied upon instead of or in preference over Russian regular forces in places like Mali, the Central African Republic, and Syria, and also in the fighting in Ukraine. So at a minimum now, we're seeing defections, not only with Prigozhin himself, sort of in a quasi-exile in Belarus, but we're seeing defections reportedly of some Wagner forces. You probably saw that the Wagner troops shot down approximately 9 aircraft, Russian aircraft, so they're brothers, so to speak, and resulting in the death, I think, of 17 pilots and crew members. So this is leading to some in the Wagner group to leave the group, saying we're not going to fight our own people. So Prigozhin in the end didn't bring down Putin, but he may have brought down Wagner.
Right. And in your assessment, what could be really the motivation for this revolt, and the fact that he's safe and he's been sent to Belarus?
Well, I think the best explanation I've seen, and of course it's opaque, right? Very few people have knowledge of what goes on in the minds of a Prigozhin or a Putin. But the best explanation I've seen is that Prigozhin was not getting the resources he wanted from the Ministry of Defense. He was in a long-running feud with Shoigu and Gerasimov, the military leadership in Russia, and that he was being told that his role was not sustainable. Basically, Wagner could not take Bakhmut, at least not in a decisive way, and it was not the leading role that he had foreseen for his forces. So being starved of resources, being starved of fire support, and being in this long-running feud with the Ministry of Defense, he felt his position was eroding. And I think he did this high-stakes gamble in order to shore up that position, but he lost. He was gambling that Putin would sort of give him concessions as a result of a serious threat. But Putin sort of called his bluff, and I think it doesn't end well for Prigozhin here. I think that's what his motivation was, though.
Right. And finally, I do want to ask you this, Colonel Outzen. Now, the West truly doesn't have a side in this internal strife that has erupted over the weekend. Now, Prigozhin, whose men are accused of brutal human rights abuses on one side, and Putin, of course, who's revived, a World War II style, war in many ways.
That's true. There's an old military adage that when your enemy is destroying himself, don't get in the way. So we see the strains and the stress of an unsuccessful war, showing up in the Russian forces. The best thing for the West now is to let it play out. It's definitely going to damage Putin's war effort. It should give a little bit of sort of support to Ukraine's counteroffensive to take back some of its own territory. There are people who say, well, this was a big CIA operation. Of course, that's fantasy. We couldn't plan something like that and pull it off if we had even wanted to. But the best thing for the West is to watch and see and take advantage of what splits develop in the Russian war effort following this.
Right, Colonel Rich Alson, appreciate you talking to us this evening and sharing your perspective and what this really means for Russia and for Vladimir Putin. Thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let's move on to other news now. The US President Donald Trump has changed his political fundraising site. He plans to divert more donations from political supporters to fund his mounting legal costs, as multiple court cases have put an increased strain on his resources. The disclosure text on the Trump presidential campaign WinRed digital fundraising platform has been changed. It now specifies that 10% of Trump's political contributions will go to his legal battles via the Save America Political Action Committee. This is in sharp contrast to when he used to take 1% previously from his political donations for his legal fee. And according to Trump's campaign platforms, the other 90% will be used for political campaigning to return him to the White House for a second term. The cost of Trump's court battles can be seen in Save America's PAC legal expenditures, and according to the Federal Election Commission, Trump's expenditures have ballooned from $1.9 million to $14.6 million in 2022. Among his legal issues, he faces a 37-count criminal indictment, including violations of the Espionage Act and sexual abuse civil lawsuits. Donald Trump remains the frontrunner for the 2024 GOP nomination. Last week, his campaign boasted that it had raised $7 million from supporters. With his campaign's new fundraising split, it would mean that around $700,000 could be put towards his legal defense if donations were made through WinRed. Just like Trump, and according to reports, Republican presidential candidate Florida Governor DeSantis is also fighting lawsuits with taxpayers' money. Republican supermajorities in the House and Senate tucked an unprecedented almost $16 million into the state's $117 billion budget for litigation costs. This is being used to either defend policies of DeSantis or cover his legal battles that are underway. Back home, well, India's Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has hit out at the former US President Barack Obama over his remarks on the protection of ethnic minorities in India. This comes as the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi returns to Delhi after concluding his visit to the US and Egypt. In an interview with CNN on how Biden should engage with the leaders such as the Chinese President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, the former US President responded by saying that President Biden should question Prime Minister Modi. He said the protection of ethnic minority in a majority Hindu India is something worth mentioning. He said, if I had a conversation with Prime Minister Modi, who I know well, part of my argument would be that if you do not protect the rights of ethnic minorities in India, there is a strong possibility that India at some point starts pulling apart. And we have seen what happens when you start getting those large internal conflicts. Nirmala Sitharaman has now lashed out at the former US President Barack Obama, questioning his comments on the Indian ethnic minorities, saying the US under his rule had bombed 7 Muslim-majority nations. She further pointed to Egypt having become the 6th Muslim-majority country to confer its highest civilian honor on Prime Minister Modi.
United States ka bayan de rahe.
It was surprising that when PM was visiting the US, a former US president was making a statement on Indian Muslims. I am speaking with caution. We want a good friendship with the US. But comments come from there on India's religious tolerance. Perhaps 7 Muslim-dominated countries were bombed due to him. More than 26,000 bombs were dropped.
And Nirmala Sitharaman was not the only one to react to Obama's comments. The former commissioner of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, Johnny Moore, too reacted, saying that for the former president should spend his energy complimenting India more than criticizing India.
The former president should spend his energy complementing India more than criticizing India. India is the most diverse country in human history. It's not a perfect country, just like the United States is not a perfect country, but its diversity is its strength, and we should be complementing the largest democracy in the world every chance that we have. And so I think it was the time to celebrate a historic visit, rather than leveling some criticism on it.
Now, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi returned to India on Monday after a hectic two-nation tour of US and Egypt. He was welcomed at the airport by senior leaders of the ruling BJP who hailed his historic US tour. While the Japanese military is on its way to adopt Starlink's technology in the coming fiscal year, the technology being tested is Starlink's internet satellite service. While the Ministry of Defense already has access to communication satellites, adding on SpaceX technologies would add another constellation of satellites in the Earth's low orbit. It is a rather precautionary measure for countries to build resilience against the risk of jamming of communication or attacks on satellites in case of conflict that arises. Japan's forces have been testing Starlink since March with multiple systems in training. Interestingly, Starlink's technology is already being used by Ukraine in the battlefield, and Russia is making all the attempts to block the same. The US Defense Department had made the arrangements to provide Starlink services in Japan. Well, troubles for Indian ED tech giant Beijing continue. Now, several former employees have accused the company of not depositing their provident fund amount. And according to a media report, most employees have not been paid their provident fund money for the current fiscal year. The provident fund of many employees was credited after a huge delay, and payments for the final 4 months of the previous financial year were made on June 19th. However, the company has called the delay a technical glitch. And according to India's provident fund rules, a company should deposit the money for a month by the 15th of the following month. A delay could attract penalty charges of 5 to 100% of the amount. Byju's lately has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. It is locked in a tense legal battle with the lenders in the US over restructuring a $1 billion loan. The ED tech company, once valued at over $22 billion, is now facing allegations of financial irregularities after 3 board members as well as the auditor Deloitte resigned. This at a time when the company laid off over 1,000 people as it struggles to earn a profit. Well, WhatsApp has unfortunately become one of the most infamous apps for scams to occur, probably owing to its massive usage and popularity. This time, scammers have circulated a new link to install WhatsApp Pink. In a recent advisory by the Mumbai police, officials have strictly warned people to stay away from this new scam. Let's get you more details. Well, the Pink version of WhatsApp claims to offer many new features and enhances the WhatsApp experience, but it is a phishing link that can give hackers access to users' confidential data. From financial scams to loss of contacts and personal information, hackers can harm anyway. If you have by any chance installed WhatsApp Pink, first step is to uninstall the app, and ideally all app updates should be updated from the Google Play Store or the App Store for iOS users. Lastly, it is very important to stay vigilant in the digital world, of course. Now time for news from the Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. might have been a box office success, but artists narrate a harrowing tale of what went on behind the scenes. Over 100 crew members quit working on the blockbuster Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse before its completion, wondering why. Well, the crew members, including artists, animators and production executives, decided to exit the film due to unsustainable working conditions. And according to reports, the major overhauls were a result of creator Phil Lord's management style. This includes his preference for editing fully rendered work instead of making changes in the planning stage. This allegedly led to a backlog of work across different departments. The artist said that they worked more than 11 hours a day, 7 days a week for more than a year to make up for the lost time. Sony executives, however, dispute these claims, including allegations about Lord's working style. This isn't the first time that a crew left their project midway. Previously, a half-dozen camera crew workers had walked off from the sets of Alec Baldwin's Rust to protest the working conditions. The crew's complaints included long hours, commutes, and the lack of gun safety inspections.
Mr. Baldwin, Detective William.
Well, sports news now, and Liu Yin has become just the second Chinese woman to win a golfing major. The 20-year-old holed a nervy birdie putt on the 18th hole to win the Women's PGA Championship by one stroke. Ireland's Leona Maguire started the final round at the golf club in New Jersey with a one-shot lead, but her challenge fizzled out with 3 bogeys on her first 11 holes. South Korea's Jenny Shin put herself in the mix with a birdie on the first, but that would be the only shot that she gained in the final round. Another Chinese player, Xiu Lin, then added to the excitement by rocketing up the leaderboard following 5 birdies on the front 9 that saw her tie Shin for the lead. An hour's delay due to rain fired by Yin's challenge, and she moved to a share of the lead with her landlord Lin, following back-to-back birdies on the 13th and 14th holes. Japan's Yuka Saso made it a 3-way tie for 4 birdies between holes 10 and 15. A bogey on the 16th seemingly ended her challenge, but she then rolled in a birdie on the 18th to draw level with Yin. Yin responded with a 15-foot birdie on the 18th to claim her second title of the season following a win at the LA Open in March. Well, that's a wrap on this news bulletin. Coming up next is Beyond Speed. Stay with us.
WION.
आने वाली खुशी के लिए एक ख्याल ही काफी है। ईबिक्स कैश हर खुशी के लिए काफी है। कभी कभी खुशी के लिए एक उदाहरण ही काफी है। ईबिक्स कैश हर खुशी के लिए काफी है।
WION Health Resort is unique, the only one of its kind. Experience the 4 paths of natural wellness: yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy. Each uniquely customized program improves the whole person to make every person whole. Come to WION Health Resort. Make your reservation at WION.com.
After the collapse of the Kherson Dam and the deluge caused, fighting intensifies between the Ukrainian and the Russian forces. As the much talked about Ukrainian counter-offensive seems to be getting underway, France, Germany and Poland firm up talks on the security guarantees Ukraine desperately needs. All eyes are now on NATO leaders' July summit in the Lithuanian capital. Will it focus on Ukraine's push for accession to NATO?
Who will be the next US president? As Trump gears up to take on Biden, his deputy Pence calls him unfit. But it's DeSantis who is drumming up support. A dozen Republicans in the fray and counting. Will a crowded contest benefit Trump? Race for the White House on WION. World is One.
Gravitas tells you stories which others won't. And tonight we will tell you about this new strategic map that is being drawn.
They say your enemy's enemy is your friend. Is that the foundation of the new defense bridge between India and America?
This is what separates us from others who claim to be telling you global stories that matter. In the last 3 days, WION has been traveling across Syria. You are in Latakia city right now. Tell us, what is the situation on ground? At Gravitas, we don't just tell you stories from selected countries from around the world.
2 years since the Myanmar military coup, the people of Myanmar continue to live in a nightmare.
Because it does not suit their propaganda, or because they are too scared to speak truth to power.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is One.